Hello again, welcome to another one of our online lectures. Today we're going to be looking at Mesoamerica, and specifically we're going to be looking at the earliest Americans. In fact, what we're going to try to do here today is set up how the different cultures of Mesoamerica got to this region. We're going to specifically in this unit look at several different groups of people, including the Olmec and Zapotec. We're also going to talk about the Mayas, the Aztecs, and the Incas. And you can see the Maya Empire here, the Aztec Empire here, the Olmec, who we're going to talk about, are right here as indicated by this head, and down here in Monte Alban are going to be the Zapotec. Those are going to be four of the groups we're going to look at during this unit. Mesoamerica itself, though, really is the southern tip of Mexico and the northern part of Guatemala, which would be right here. So all of this here is Mexico. See the Gulf of Mexico right here. So that's really what is meant by Mesoamerica. So we want to see who the earliest Americans were and really how they got to this region, because humans were not indigenous. They did not develop in this part of the world. They had to get here somehow. So that's going to be part of our story. So we've got only one question we're going to answer, one constructive response question. Question says, how did geography impact the emergence and rise of the civilizations in the Americas? So we're going to be able to provide some geography here to answer that question. Specifically, what are we going to learn here today? Well, we are going to look at how did the earliest Americans reach North America. Like I said, they're not indigenous to this part of the world, so they must have traveled here somehow, and we're going to see how that happened. Second thing we're going to look at, we are going to look at the mother culture of Mesoamerica called the Olmec, very briefly, and then we will follow that up by looking at another group just southwest of the Olmec called the Zapotec. So let's look at the earliest Americans by talking a little bit about geography in North and South America. First of all, we have to understand that North and South America are one really giant connected piece of land that stretches unbroken for 9,000 miles. It is possible to travel from the northern part of North America down to the southernmost tip of South America without having to use any type of boat or crossing large bodies of water. Now, here's what's kind of interesting. Back when we had an ice age, a lot of the ocean water on the planet was sucked up in glaciers, lowering the sea level, the water level of our oceans, which means land that's underwater was exposed. So North and South America was originally connected to Asia by a land bridge called Beringia, and I will show you where this is on the map. But basically, we were connected, and still are, to Asia. It's just the problem is the piece of land called Beringia is no longer there. It's covered by water now. So we think, based on evidence, based on artifacts found, that most of the inhabitants or ancestors of Native Americans migrated to the Americas this way by crossing this land bridge, again called Beringia. We do know some other people traveled by boat to get here. There is some evidence of that. However, we think it's a very, very small part of the population because boat and shipbuilding technology just wasn't advanced enough to handle the rough seas of the oceans. So here's what we're looking at. It takes a minute to just kind of get acclimated to what this map is. If you look over here in the little key, you can see the world map. We're zoomed in right here on the eastern part of Asia and the western part, basically Alaska. Here you've got Alaska right here. Everything that you see here in these lighter colors would have been exposed at one point. So somebody standing over here in Russia could have conceivably walked all the way across this land bridge over to Alaska. And we have a lot of evidence, a lot of different things that have been found by different groups that show us that they definitely took this route in getting into North America here in Alaska and Canada. Of course, once the ice age ended, that water melted and this was all swallowed up by the sea, making it impossible to go back again across the Bering Sea here. So, peopling of America. Well, we know the people of America started arriving after the Ice Age, about 1.7 million to maybe 10,000 BC. That's when this land bridge would have been available to use. Again, the Ice Age had to happen first to swallow up a lot of that water in ice and making the water go down, thus making it the Beringia able to be crossed. The Ice Age lowered sea levels, hence Beringia, and allowed wild herds from Siberia to migrate to the Americas. People didn't just go here, come to America because they wanted to or they were curious. They did so because they were following different herds of animals. So people followed the herds and became the first Americans. They were hunter-gatherers. They had to be. I mean, it's just naturally how humans migrated, starting migrating out of Africa to all different corners of the globe, basically following the food sources. So people followed the herds and became the first Americans. Now, there's going to be a little bit of debate, of course, based on evidence found, but some say that the earliest humans found in North or South America date as far back as 40,000 BC. Some say no, it's not that old. Some say it's only around 10,000 BC when the Ice Age began to end. Either way, we do have some evidence that's found. So you got to look at the things people drop, the things that people use, the things that people create and leave behind. And one of the most obvious ones is spearheads. This again shows us they were definitely following the animals for food. So spearheads found in New Mexico date back to 9,500 BC. Well, people didn't just walk across into Alaska, into Canada, and go straight down to New Mexico. This would have taken a very long time to do that. So you can reasonably add 500, 1,000, maybe 5,000, or even 10,000 years to this number because we know it would have taken them quite a long time to migrate from Alaska down to New Mexico. But it gives us sort of a nice ballpark idea to say when did people start coming here. Then we suggest about 12,000 to 10,000 years ago the Ice Age ended, which means the ice melted and Beringia was swallowed by the sea. It could never again be able to be crossed. We see the early evidence of agriculture. People in America around 7,000 BC, or about 9,000 years ago. So people started to set up farming, which means they started to set up permanent settlements in cities. That's something that comes with agriculture. You can't be nomads. You really can't be hunter-gatherers anymore. So with agriculture came permanent settlements. It all makes sense. And we have lots of different cultures that have thrived, lots of different Native American cultures that have thrived in North and South America, but they didn't start out here. Their earliest ancestors had to come across this land bridge in order to make these civilizations possible. So, what is Mesoamerica? Well, we know how the people got here, but what we want to do is we want to spend the rest of this unit looking at this particular piece of property. Again, we're going to look at 4 cultures in this region. One of them is going to be down in South America. So we're going to start with the Olmec, who are right in here. You can see Olmec heartland. We're going to see the Oaxaca Valley, which is home to the Zapotec. And then we're going to look at the Mayas, which were right here, the Aztecs, which are right here, and we'll end the unit with the Incas, which are down in South America. So these cultures would not exist if those early Americans did not cross Beringia into North America. This is just another look at the same type of map, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. So let's talk about the Olmec. Well, the Olmec were located in the jungles of southern Mexico around 1200 BC. They're often called Mesoamerica's mother culture because we know they're the first one. We know that they're the first thriving culture there. A lot of the other cultures, including the Zapotec, Mayas, and Aztec, take some of their culture from the Olmec. So they are the mother culture. And the way they were discovered was really interesting. One day a farmer in 1860 was clearing part of his field, part of a jungle, to plant more crops, and he came in contact with this giant stone head. Had no idea what it was. And scientists, archaeologists came, started researching it, and they actually found the location of a civilization that they never knew existed. And so this large head really became the sort of introduction to the Olmec culture. And I'll show you a picture of this on the next slide. We know that the Olmec built columns, they built altars, of course they built these colossal sculpted heads. Not a real sophisticated culture based on what we found, but definitely were able to build some things that still stand today. So they thrive from roughly 800 to 400 BC. We know that they worshipped a number of different things. So they were polytheistic, believed to have worshipped a variety of nature gods, including the jaguar spirit. Jaguars factor very heavily into the culture of the Olmec, as well as the Mayas and Aztecs. Now, what happened to the Olmec, we're not really sure. Their collapse is unknown. Possibilities include decline by outside rulers. I mean, maybe they were taken over by somebody else. Maybe they were absorbed into another culture. We also kind of see some evidence that the Olmec began destruction of their own monuments, possibly when their leaders died, maybe in some type of sacrificial ceremony. They started to destroy their own property. Maybe they turned violent on one another. We have some evidence of that, but it doesn't definitively point to anything. So we're not really sure what happened to the Olmec. Here's the giant head or heads. There's several of them that were found. You can imagine clearing the jungle and finding one of these. You'd be rather startled. But this is what led to the discovery of the Olmec civilization. Now, the other group we're going to talk about in this area is the Zapotec. They're actually located a little bit southwest. So if you can see in my little cursor here, the Olmec were found right here. If we go down to the south and to the west, we're going to find the Zapotec culture. So let's talk a little bit about who the Zapotec were. The Zapotec developed around the time of the declining Olmec in the Oaxaca Valley. Oaxaca Valley is definitely known for better farming. It's a little bit better conditions because where the Olmec was really hot, dense jungles. It's difficult to farm there, but it's going to be a little bit better here in the Oaxaca Valley. So Oaxaca Valley has fertile soil, a milder climate, and enough rainfall to support agriculture. Things we found out about the Zapotec, we know by 500 BC they had created early forms of writing and had a calendar system. Tells us a little bit about the sophistication of their culture and some of the things they're able to create. But one of the things that we really see about the Zapotec that really makes them stand out is the cities that they built. And the first real urban center in Mesoamerica was a place called Monte Alban, which at its peak had about 25,000 people. That might not sound like much to you and I. That's roughly the population of Elk River today. But that would have been a pretty thriving metropolis back in this time period. Monte Alban had paved stones, had towering pyramids, temples, and palaces. And when it comes to finding out what happened to the Zapotec people, just like we said about the Olmec, we don't really have a definitive answer. The decline of the Zapotec is also a mystery. It's kind of limited. If they don't leave you a lot of written records, which both of these cultures didn't do, you have to go off the evidence that you find. You have to go off the artifacts, the stone buildings, things like that. And those don't always tell you a definitive, story about their culture. And so we can only surmise what happened to both the Olmec and Zapotec. But as of right now, they're still pretty mysterious to historians. This is a picture of Monte Alban. You can see some of those pyramids that were built. You can see it would have been a rather large city with lots of buildings. You can imagine probably a lot of wood huts where people would have lived around the outskirts of town. Most of those, of course, have deteriorated or been destroyed. A lot of the stone buildings still stand there today. Olmec and Zapotec legacy. Why do we even talk about them? What's important about them? Well, they influenced the powerful Maya. And the Maya are the group we're going to talk about next, one of the most dominant cultures here in Mesoamerica. Olmec definitely left culture. They left notions of planned ceremonial centers and some glyph writing. We're going to see the Mayas are really going to be good at writing glyphs, which is kind of like hieroglyphics from the ancient Egyptians. So the Zapotec take that a little bit further and leave hieroglyphics and a calendar system. And we know that the Zapotec really are America's first city builders based on the city of Monte Alban. They really were the first to build large-scale cities like we saw there. I want you to know there are others. There's the Moche, the Nazca, and the Chavin, which also built centers in South America. The Nazca Lines are one of the most enduring legacies of the Nazca people, but we're not going to go into a lot of detail about them. I just want you to know that there are others out there. It's not just the Olmec and Zapotec. So, our result, the earliest Americans left a lasting legacy on North and South America that would eventually influence two of Mesoamerica's greatest cultures, the Mayas and the Aztecs. So, today's story definitely represents like an introduction for us. We're looking at how did any of the earliest Americans get here. We talked about that early land bridge. Which helps us answer this question: how did geography impact the emergence and rise of civilizations in the Americas? Well, it definitely, without geography, people wouldn't have been able to come here. So it's really all about that Beringia land bridge. But we focused on that as our start, and then we branched out and looked at two of the earliest cultures that existed in Mesoamerica, the Olmec and Zapotec. And they really get this whole story started here in Mesoamerica when we look at culture. So that's going to do it here for us today. Next, we're going to look at the powerful Maya, followed by the Aztecs, and then the Incas, three of the most significant and amazing cultures that existed in the Americas long before the Europeans showed up. So we'll see you next time.